Good morning and welcome to our first Crown Forum, of course. My name is David Walrice. I'm Associate Professor and Chair of the Department of Psychology. I also serve as Assistant Provost for Student Success, and more immediately, I program and administer Crown Forum. Certainly, we all know that Morehouse is a storied liberal arts college that has served as an incubator for social justice giants since its establishment in 1867, just shy of 150 years ago. We, of course, hold as sacred a tradition of developing outstanding leaders, particularly black men leaders, having graduated cultural innovators Martin Luther King Jr., Saul Williams, Maynard Jackson, Spike Lee, Paul Judge, Keith Guru Elam of Gang Starr, Sanford Biggers, William Marcel Hayes, Lamel McMorris, and of course, Secretary Jay Johnson, and many, many more. Crown Forum, an evolution of Morehouse College's chapel service, has served as central in stoking the intellectual embers of these men listed, and it's our goal to continue to put in work such that you all are challenged to think of what your responsibility is to our communities and to the ideal of democratic freedom that we believe in, but that too often is not fully realized for those of us who are defined or understood as being in the margins. Crown Forum is where our college family is able to engage businessmen, activists, artists, politicos, educators, scientists, and ideas in our collective work toward freedom. Accordingly, we position Crown Forum as a grounding space where students are connected to and develop their dynamic humanity. So then, we find it necessary to attach Morehouse's legacy as incubator for human dignities and social justice to the lived experiences of the young men who attend the college, you all. However fundamentally absurd the need for such a declaration, for this year, Crown Forum is unapologetically connected to our sisters and founders, Alicia Garza, Opal Tamare, and Patrice Cullors, in demanding that Black Lives Matter. With the epidemic extrajudicial killings and objectification of black people, Morehouse College has a special responsibility to serve as a platform for discussion and activity relative to how it is that we ensure justice and humanity for our people throughout the diaspora. As reflected in our Crown Forum speakers this semester, there are varying entry points in how it is that we safeguard and propagate an agenda of justice and humanity in line with Black Lives Matter. Secretary of Homeland Security Jay Johnson, full introduction will follow shortly, is a Morehouse College brother who is putting in work and who has come to be in conversation today with a unique perspective relative to this year's theme, hoping to provide context to how it is that we assume special responsibilities as graduates of the college and what we can do now in service of our justice and humanity agenda. I take personal privilege here in outlining the need to be adroit and complex in how it is that we understand and execute agendas of freedom. Again, Morehouse has graduated and hosts businessmen, activists, artists, politicos, educators, scientists, each able to be revolutionaries in their own right. I look forward to talking more about Crown Forum at our formal orientation on September 8th. Until then, listen, learn, be, get, and stay free. And now, Morehouse College sophomore Jarrell Jordan, who has recently named as the 2016-17 White House HBCU All-Star, will introduce our conversation participants. Thank you, and God bless you.
Good morning, brothers. Good morning. Good morning, brothers. Good morning. Picture this, 1979. At the peak of the college SGA election season, two good friends, John Sylvanus Wilson from Philadelphia and J. Charles Johnson from New York City, are running against each other for senior class president. Of course, only one would win the lifetime position, and it was President Wilson. Still, both note the competition as indelible marks in their rich careers, still sharpening steel as it was. Dr. Wilson, the 11th president of Morehouse College, and Secretary of Homeland Security, Secretary Jay Johnson, bring that brotherhood to us today in conversation. As a champion for education, Dr. John Sylvanus Wilson Jr. has dedicated more than 25 years to the advancement of socially conscious and purposeful student success. Among many positions in higher education, he was appointed by President Obama to serve as the executive director of the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities in 2009. And in January 2013, Dr. Wilson came home to serve as the 11th president of Morehouse College. Jay Johnson's career has been a mixture of public service and private corporate law practice. He has served in 3 presidentially appointed Senate-confirmed positions, appointed by President Obama in December of 2013 as the Secretary of Homeland Security. In this role, he is the head of the 3rd largest cabinet department of the U.S. government and is responsible of counterterrorism, cybersecurity, and the protection of our national leaders. With heightened visibility and concern around the objectification and killings of young black men and women over the past 4 years, these 2 men have been vocal and active in working for equality and social justice from their respective positions. John Wilson and Jay Johnson represent the best of Morehouse College. And with that, it is my honor and privilege to present to some and introduce to others President John Wilson and Secretary Jay Johnson.
Middle.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
How y'all doing?
Good, good.
Good. Secretary Johnson, thank you for joining us. President
I
Wilson.
see I wore the wrong shoes.
Well, I thought that was funnier than what. Anyway, so we know that the theme here this year is Black Lives Matter, and I certainly want to make sure that we begin to discuss that. But I also want to talk a little bit about how you all came into your positions of service here professionally now. So we know that '79 was a great year for graduates of Morehouse College. You know it's a great year.
The best year.
Right. So you know it's a great year when you have other graduates trying to line up who graduated from our years to compare to yours. But even before '79, obviously you all come from homes where social justice and service were important. We know at the very least your grandfather, President Wilson, was the first recorded preacher here in the United States of America, and we know that your grandfather, Secretary Johnson, was the first black president of FISC, as well as a renowned sociologist. So can you talk a little bit about that, and then coming to Morehouse, and then we'll kind of take the Black Lives Matter baton from there?
Mm-hmm. Sure, thank you.
Sure.
And thanks for having us here. I do want to acknowledge the presence of other Morehouse graduates who are part of the Obama administration who are here with me, who flew down from Washington with me this morning. Percy Lambert, who works for USCIS, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security, Morehouse 2007. Albert Sanders, White House Counsel's Office, Morehouse 01, Penn Law School. Eibert Schultz, speechwriter for the Secretary of Transportation, Morehouse class of 2004, and Ron Newman, Morehouse grad, Yale Law School, now on the National Security Council staff at the White House.
Can we get them to stand
Stand
quickly?
up, please.
You guys stand up,
There we
please.
are. John and I came here in 1975, and 41 years ago this month. I have to say, I was in high school, I was a terrible student. I was a C and D student. If I got a C, it was a gift. And my father, who grew up on the campus of Fisk University because his dad was president, had the idea that I should come to Morehouse College. And they sent me here on a homecoming weekend. And I got to spend some time here. I got to spend some time across the street and realized that this was going to be home for me. There are several times in your life when you are introduced to something and you immediately recognize that it's calling you. It's calling you. And Morehouse College was calling me. And so I came here, and my lackadaisical ways continued. I had for you freshmen, don't emulate this, please. I had a 1.8 GPA my freshman year. I did all the parties. I had a good time, and just when I was getting my act together, second semester, I had a little accident with a window on the second floor of what was then Thurman Hall, which is now
LLC.
LLC, right.
LLC in that house.
I lived in LLC for 3 years, and I was living in room 204, Thurman Hall. John was room 206,
That's right.
Thurman Hall.
That's right.
And what we used to do was we'd have, and again, don't do this, all right? These are bad examples. We used to sprint and race each other down the middle hallway in the winter when it was cold, and I was racing Keith Williams,
Yep.
a good friend of his, and I was about to beat him when we got to the end of the hall, and I couldn't stop, and I put my arm up like this. I shattered the glass, shattered my arm, and that window on the second floor of LLC, I think I own, because my mother paid for it. And so I had a 1.8 GPA, but after a year of listening in sessions like this, in assembly and chapel, to the inspirational speakers, Benjamin Mays, Martin Luther King Sr., and others, something inside of me was awakened. And so sophomore year, first semester, I had a 3.0, and I also got the car Dad promised if I got a 3.0. And then sophomore year, second semester, a 3.5, and then the next 2 years I had a straight A average. And I became, and I owe that, frankly, all to the inspiration I received on this campus. And I left here, frankly, on fire. Got into a good law school. And John and I sat here the day we graduated, I think was May 18th, 1979. We sat in this room, in this newly dedicated chapel. I know it's hard for some of you to believe this was at one point new. And so my parents recognized it was a good thing for me to come to Morehouse, and I had a terrific experience here. It inspired me to do just about everything I've done since in the last 37 years.
So when you talk about that inspiration, right, that inspiration to be successful, to make good grades and all of those very important things, my assumption, and I think your intimation here, is that that success was couched in some type of purpose, right? So
Yes.
you weren't just going to Columbia Law School just to go to Columbia Law and do very well and make lots of money. I mean, there was an idea that you were grounded in this place, rooted here, fertilized here, rooted by your family, fertilized here to do some good social justice work. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's...
You're doing a good job.
Okay. Is that reasonable to say?
This place, I left this place with a purpose, recognizing that as a Morehouse man, you are set apart, you are special, you are destined to lead, and that you have to be an example for your community. And it's taught in words spoken and unspoken. So when I left here, I recognized that I thought I could, I thought about, maybe one day I could be a cabinet officer or a U.S. senator. There was no Department of Homeland Security in 1979. But I left here with a lot of ambition to do good things in public service. I also wanted to be a lawyer. I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, but I knew I wanted to make a difference, be in public service, and I have tried to pursue that mission ever since I left here.
Okay, thank you. President Wilson, how does that experience, that life narrative parallel yours, if at all?
Yeah. So I just want to say it's a privilege to sit here with Jay Johnson when I talked to the freshman class and welcome them, the class of 2020. the class with perfect vision. I told them that, look around you, look at your classmates, and imagine greatness. And I have to tell you guys that just to sit up here with Jay, whom I knew as a freshman, and to see where he's gone, for us to look across from each other, see where we are now, is a powerful thing. And I hope you have that feeling 20, 30, 40 years from now about your classmates at Morehouse College. Similar story, I grew up, parents had gone to HBCUs. My grandfather was a renowned preacher, was recorded in 1934, and I have a lot of his, we have a lot of his recordings. But growing up, there was this picture of my grandfather in the house. He had this stern look, and that picture used to kind of shake me up. He's a man who wrote letters to W.B. Du Bois, and Du Bois wrote him back. There was a conversation about how to make, basically, Black Lives Matter. That's what that conversation was, easily translated. I knew I was going to come to Morehouse, but it was last minute. Similar experience. I visited in high school Lincoln University, and during homecoming and otherwise, and applied to Lincoln, Penn State, a few other places, Penn. Got in, but I was going to Lincoln up until like July, after I graduated high school and before I was supposed to go, and something hit me and said I want to go to Morehouse. And I ended up driving down a couple days before everybody else came and filled out an application in the Dean of Students' office, and was taken a room, Thurman Hall, room 206. And a couple days later, Jay and Martin Luther King III, Joel Boykin, who I see right there, moved in, a lot of freshmen, and that's how I came to Morehouse. And from day one, there was this elevated expectation that you have to go out and make a difference in the world. So it's important to handle your business here and get ready, because you have to play a role. So that's how I got here.
And was that something that was reinforced in terms of the brotherhood? So I hear you pointing to Brother Boykin, you all are talking about good friends in the dorms and things like that. Have you all had conversations throughout your life? I mean, certainly yes. When people have accolades and stuff like that, you can give them a nice pat on the back and things like that. But Spike Lee was here when you all were here and all. Do you all have those kinds of conversations saying this is what's good, here's some suggestions? Does that brotherhood still
all the time
persist? Okay.
Yeah. All the time.
Okay.
Absolutely.
It's pretty constant.
You will make friends here that you will have for the rest of your life, literally. And I heard John say something at a commencement a couple of years ago that is so true. This experience of brotherhood, for the rest of your life, you will seek to emulate in the fraternity, in the barbershop, in the alumni association meeting. Yeah. You will seek to emulate for the rest of your life. And it's because this is such a special experience on this campus for 4 years. And so you will build and make relationships here. My roommate, Charles Hawk, is sitting right there. That you'll never forget and you'll never escape.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So tell me this, President Wilson, you just kind of gave a nod to this idea around Black Lives Matter. Your grandfather having a dialogue with Du Bois and kind of nodding in the direction of where our young people are today, right? Mm-hmm. Young people today, it is most conveniently understood as a hashtag Black Lives Matter, but the sisters who established it talk about it in terms of it being more than that, a movement, right? And a movement that squarely highlights people within our community, queer, women, who have been marginalized as well, right? Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us about what each of you, what Black Lives Matter means to you? Because I think we get to have our own personal lens for how it is that we communicate and work towards social justice and equality for our people across the diaspora and then further. So can you guys take that?
Sure. Yeah. when I notice you respect Black Lives Matter movement, I think back to my days in college. It is the kind of thing that I would have been involved in. I think we were all kind of, activism wasn't anything special.
We used to demonstrate about the food at the school.
Right, the food in the cafeteria.
It's much better now.
Yeah.
Much better now.
Much better.
Right.
I mean, those of you, it's hard for you to understand that because you don't know what it was like before, either back in the day or just a minute ago. But the bottom line is this. Black Lives Matter has caused me to grow. Because I will just say, I remember the conversations I had early on about Black Lives Matter, and a couple of our white colleagues in higher education asked me, said, "You got Black Lives Matter at Morehouse? Why do you need Black Lives Matter at a place like Morehouse College?" I gave two answers. Number one, Black Lives Matter is kind of a frame for those who protest, those who are oriented toward making rough places smooth and crooked places straight, and making this a better society, living up to its ideals. So it's that, and that's the Morehouse tradition. But the other angle on this is, and this is where the growth came in. I was talking with some Black Lives Matter students, was in a dialogue with them all last year and before, and they said, the marginality that the LGBTQIA community feels on a black college campus is not unlike the marginality that black students felt on white campuses back in the day and even now. And so it has to matter to you, Dr. Wilson, as president, to ensure that we have an inclusive community. And I'm proud that we have a team assembled to be engaged in this conversation, and Professor Rice is in that group. Dr. Timothy Sams, I believe, is here somewhere. He's in that group to explore how we can improve this campus as a Morehouse community and not have anybody marginalized in any sense. That's a sense in which Black Lives Matter has influenced our agenda at Morehouse. Of course, it's a national movement. Spike Lee, our classmate, did a film about this, focused on the movement at Missouri, and we hope to screen that here. It was screened over at Spelman during the inauguration of Dr. Mary Schmidt Campbell.
Those of us of our generation and older have to appreciate the similarities and the historical differences between movements today and the civil rights movement. I'll never forget a t-shirt I saw not too long ago, and I think it was a Black Lives Matter demonstration. And the t-shirt said, "This is not your grandmother's civil rights movement," which was jarring to me because, when John and I, when we got here in 1975, the civil rights movement was still fresh in people's minds. There were people on this campus who had been part of that movement. Dr. King had been dead for only 7 years. A lot of his colleagues, people who had taught Martin Luther King, were still on the faculty here. So it was still fresh in our minds. And so we grew up with the notion that bringing about social change, protests for social change, is achieved in a certain manner. And in many respects, I think it still has to be. So, and I say this as someone in government who is the recipient and the subject of a lot of attention, political pressure, political protest. I have demonstrators in the immigration space when I speak very often, and I receive lots of attention, lots of letters, lots of requests for meetings from members of Congress about various different issues. And so I think that whether it's Black Lives Matter or any other movement to bring about fundamental change, it's got to have two components. And one component is harder than the other. First, protest, peaceful, civil, obedient protest to highlight an issue, or through a number of other ways in a democracy that is available to its citizens, to highlight an issue, if necessary, to protest an issue. But then you also have to think about, well, how do we bring about the change? We've highlighted the issue, so how are we going to, in a constructive manner, bring about the change that is necessary in the political process that is available in a democracy? And that is actually the harder part of a mission, of a movement. How do we constructively engage the cabinet officer, the Congress, the president, the mayor, the police commissioner, to bring about the change that we seek? It's more than just highlighting the issue. How do you mobilize to apply political pressure to bring about change? And so the civil rights movement that John and I know, and that our predecessors know, was about not just the march, the demonstration, the highlighting of segregation of the issue. It was also about how do we engage the political process to bring about the change that our constituents want. And that's a challenge. So sometimes I go to college campuses and people are shouting at me, no more deportations, no more deportations, stop the deportations. And I want to have a conversation with them about, well, work with me and tell me how you would change the immigration system to bring about the reform that you want. Do you want to engage the executive branch? Do you want to engage the congressional branch? And here, think about the most effective, constructive ways to focus all of that energy on the point in the process where change can be achieved. So I think that that's as important, if not more, than highlighting the issue in the first place.
So to either or both of you, how do you respond when, the idea, and I graduated in '95, and I think of the Rodney King non-indictment of the officers who beat down Rodney King, and I know that the feeling I had then was hopelessness, right? You're so frustrated because I was connected to, civil rights era and, what my family went through and all that kind of stuff. And there was this communication of it's important to be orderly, to be peaceful, to think toward a logical end in how it is that you can move systems. Because we're all talking about, when we're talking about extrajudicial killings of black folk, we're talking about systems that are conditioning folks in a certain way that allows them not to see black folk as folks, but rather as objects. So away from that tangent a bit, how is it that you all talk to folks who might be so frustrated? So you're saying, be orderly, be civil, there's a Morehouse way to do things and all that kind of stuff. How do you talk to me if I'm saying, but I'm pissed? I see this stuff on the news every night. Social media has this stuff presented to me that I'm nothing but an object. Television, has black women depicted in a certain way and all these kinds of things. How do I step back from that rage, right? To be able to make a difference. Does that make sense?
First of all, my grandfather, just before he died, 60 years ago, he wrote an essay in the New York Times magazine section. This is 1956, just as the civil rights movement was beginning to take off. Segregation still existed in Nashville, Tennessee, and Atlanta, Georgia, and elsewhere. And one of the things he wrote, which I like to quote in speeches, is, despite our current situation, there is no hopelessness or bitterness, and that faith in the code of this nation always is greater than the feeling of despair. And that was at the beginning of the civil rights movement, which he did not live to see. And so I believe that continued faith in the code of our nation, in our democratic process, is vital. But also, we need to channel our anger into positive energy. Anger is energy. And you can reframe that into a march, into a letter writing campaign, to City Hall, to the state capitol. There's power in numbers. There's power in numbers, definitely. There are lots of people in this room. You're on a much broader AU campus. There's power in numbers. And you need to find among you those who are strategic thinkers in how to engage the political process to bring about change. Anger gets you maybe a third of the way to what you want to achieve. But then there's that other 2/3 that is necessary to bring about the necessary change.
I agree with Jay. I think just to stay in the frame of your question, what do you say, when it's raw, when it's just happened? I believe people have to let off steam. We used to do that. We'd be out protesting here, but then I returned to our frame, my frame. Do that. Make it tasteful, make it high road, make it, there is a Morehouse style. There's a Morehouse way to do things, and we should talk about that too. But the bottom line is, you are here in a phase of your lives to prepare yourselves for a successful life and a successful career. And you're here to set a trajectory for yourselves. So being out and protesting is a healthy thing to do, but you still have to get an A in chemistry and in biology. You still have to do well in the classroom here. You still have to stay ambitious and go to graduate school and then make your way up the ladder, because you will be a greater force for good when you do that than you can ever be in the streets blowing off that energy, working out that energy. You have to see the big picture and look at the long term of this. So that's what I would say to them. I believe it. I had it. I think we were there in terms of the outrages that we saw, outrageous acts of violence, racism that we saw coming through and we've seen for a long time. It is a shame that not much has changed in some fundamental ways. And this summer we saw it with Philando Castile and Alton Sterling. Boy, I mean, those tragedies were as stark as we saw them back when we were in college. And the response to them in a lot of ways was predictable, understandable. But that's why I picked up the pen and wrote to you young men that you need to stay disciplined, you need to stay determined, and stay on the high road. And the bottom line is, you'll be a greater force for good if you do that than you will ever be working in the immediate aftermath of these tragedies.
Class of '79 was a fairly militant class. I'm about to get Dr. Wilson in a lot of trouble here. We did not like the choice of our commencement speaker. We were not consulted, and we were upset. We were angry that we were not consulted about the choice of our commencement speaker. So we engaged the president's office in a very constructive way, and we got Louis Farrakhan as our baccalaureate speaker and Joshua Nkomo as our graduation speaker, leader of the movement in Zimbabwe, which was sometimes a violent movement, who stood right here on this stage and talked to us about how sometimes the white man only understands the barrel of a gun. That was the choice for us for our commencement speaker. But we knew how to engage the president's office, Dr. Gloucester, to bring about the change that we sought.
That's right. We were.
But you don't have to do that to Dr. Wilson.
We were respectful in registering our opinion about this. And actually, I should say that, you all may have, I saw some reactions when he said Minister Louis Farrakhan. You all may have some reactions to him. The time at which we chose him, I mean, his run-up, and there were some negative ways in which he was in the press kind of in the 80s. At that point, he was a guy who came to town, as black Muslim, who gave a message that's very similar to what I just said. He said, he used to quote Elijah Muhammad and saying, the best way to show that a glass is dirty is to hold a clean one up next to it. You got to be a clean glass. You got to be smart. You got to have your stuff together. You got to be a force for good in ways people can't even imagine. This has always been a clean glass campus, all right? We put men out there, listen, we put men out there who compared to other men are cut above, all right? The best way to show that a glass is dirty is to hold a clean glass up next to it. We chose him because his messaging was thematically consistent with what we determined to be the Morehouse way. And Joshua Nkomo was between Robert Mugabe and Joshua Nkomo, and I think we chose well there. And ironically, Strive Masiwa, who was a trustee here, our commencement speaker last May, was at the time, and we had no way of knowing this, would eventually be mentored by Joshua Nkomo. And so when Strive and I made that connection, and our relationship has been beautiful ever since, because we have a long-standing connection with Joshua Nkomo.
Let me pick up on something John said about the glasses. You all hear this expression, you always tell a Morehouse man, but you can't tell him much. It really is true. When you're out in the larger society, if you're a Morehouse graduate, you can always spot the other Morehouse man in the room, on the other end of the room. Or when you first meet somebody, you can always say, this is a Morehouse man, before he even has the chance to tell you, I'm class of 2004, or I'm class of 2007.
Yeah.
By what they're doing, their accomplishments, and how you carry yourself in society. We can spot them across the room.
Yeah.
And you freshmen, over the next 4 years, you're going to learn exactly what that means.
Yeah.
And what is expected of you.
Yeah.
And we expect a lot of you.
You're going to learn that and be that. And I should say this. Of course, I was in the first term of the Obama administration. I'm so glad that Jay brought these Morehouse men who are now in the administration with him. It's the kind of thing a Morehouse man would do. He's a secretary now. He has the power to say, hey, get on a plane. We're going down to our alma mater. That's a powerful brotherhood thing. But I have to tell you, when I was in the first term, moving around Washington, D.C., moving around the federal buildings, the White House and everything, you could tell Morehouse guys. I mean, it really is true. There's a way in which we carry ourselves as if we know who we are. All right? So a lot of your freshmen, you may be just becoming introduced to that, but by the time you're a senior, you're going to walk in a different way, and you're going to have a different kind of outlook that makes this very, very powerful for you.
Which includes, by the way, we're hijacking your program, sorry. Which includes, by the way, respect for the dignity of every single human being you meet. It's not just the tie you wear, the suit you wear, but respect for the dignity of every person you meet. That is part and parcel of how a Morehouse man carries himself.
Yeah.
So by way of kind of concluding here, right? We have about 4 minutes left. You talked, President Wilson, about how some of the things remain constant in terms of challenges that we face within the diaspora. Can you talk about how some of the things have changed for the better? And we've already kind of, I think you guys have done an excellent job of contextualizing and introducing this class year, right? Or this academic year to kind of where it is and how it is that we can generally comport ourselves. And so that's encouraging. It's encouraging to look at you all. It's encouraging to know that Spike Lee, who did When the Levees Break, is a classmate of the director of Homeland Security, right? So those kinds of things make such an important difference, and that's encouraging to I think many of us. Can you all talk about some of the social changes that have occurred in this country that we can kind of latch on to be able to be encouraged, to be able to hold tight to that hopefulness and not kind of wallow in the hopelessness?
Well, I'll put it this way. America is a better place. I'm not one of these guys who will say that nothing's changed and, you know, we haven't made any progress and the American experiment is a failure. There's no question that this country is better now than it was when we were students at Morehouse. There's no question about that. For God's sake, he's serving an African-American president. I mean, that was not necessarily imaginable then for a lot of people, though it was for us, because we had the sense that if we do this, that is, if we be Morehouse, okay, and be Morehouse men as we move through the world, then we are going to win. We're going to change this country, and we're going to change this world. So I remain a disciple of that thinking. I think what we're doing here at Morehouse College is going to impact the country and the world on the road ahead. I think we are a stronger institution for it, but we could be much, much stronger, and we intend to be. We could be much, much better, and we intend to be. Final thing I'll say, just to your point, you have a lot more competition than we had. There are people not just around the country, but around the world, in Asia, in China, and in India, who are pretty much after what you're after, and they want the option to employ you or not. All right? So you have a lot more competition than I think we had. And yet there's a lot more competition for you than there was in our day. The doors of white colleges have flung wide open, and you young men can go anywhere. An African-American male with a B average coming out of high school can go free somewhere for little or no money. And so it's a better world in that sense. You have more options. You chose the right option in coming to Morehouse College. Trust me, and you'll be better for it. You'll know that.
I would say the first difference that comes to my mind when you ask that question,
yes, sir,
between 40 years ago and now, when I say 40 years ago, it makes it sound like we're really old.
Yeah.
Is you have a lot more role models than we did.
Yeah.
And from the President of the United States on down. Now there's a corollary to that, which is that we have created a higher level of expectations for you also.
Yeah.
You can be a state senator, you can be a U.S. senator, you can be a cabinet officer. And many of you should. I'm sure in this room, there are future leaders of this country, in politics, in religion, in business. So much is expected of you now that you've been blessed with the opportunity to come to this place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you both very much for joining us, you two brothers. We're going to, before we exit, I'm going to ask Jarrell Jordan if he'll come up, and we'll sing the college hymn in conclusion. All right? Thank you so much.
Dear old Morehouse, dear old Morehouse, we have pledged our lives to thee, and will ever, yea, forever, give ourselves in loyalty. True forever, true forever, to old Morehouse may we be. So the other into ties more brotherly. Holy Spirit, Holy Spirit, make us steadfast, honest, true, to own Morehouse and her